hierarchy, throwing and catching exception, built-in exceptions, creating own exceptions, stack trace elements, input output basics, streams, byte streams and character streams, reading and writing console, reading and writing file templates. So different between error and exceptions are: error indicates serious problems and abnormal conditions that most applications should not try to handle. That error defines problems that are not expected to get caught under normal circumstances by a program. For example, memory error, hardware error, JVM error, that is Java Virtual Machine error. Exceptions are conditions within the code. A developer can handle such conditions that take necessary corrective actions. For example, divided by zero exception, null pointer exception, arithmetic exceptions, and array index out of boundary exceptions. An exception, it is an exceptional event. It is a problem that arises during the execution of a program. When an exception occurs, the normal flow of a program is disrupted and the program or applications terminates abnormally, which is not recommended. Therefore, these exceptions are to be handled. If an exception is raised which has not been handled by the programmer, then the program execution can get terminated and the system prints a non-user friendly error message. And example exception thread main java.language.arithmetic exception, which is divided by 0, and the exception demo.main exception demo.java file, where exception demo is a class name, main is the method name, and exception demo.java is a file name, java files is a line number. An exception can occur for many different reasons. Following are some scenarios when the exception occurs: a user has entered an invalid data, a file that needs to be opened that cannot be found, a network connection that has been lost in the middle of communications, or the Java virtual machine has run out of memory. Exception hierarchy: all exceptions classes or subtypes in the java.language.exception class. The exception class is a subclass of thrownable class. For example, java.language, it gives object, it gives throwable. For throwable, there are two categories: errors and exceptions. In exception, there are two kinds of categories: runtime and other exceptions. So keywords that are used in exception handling: totally there are 5 keywords that are used in Java exception handling. First one is try, catch, finally throws. In try, a try or catch block is placed around the code that might generate an exception. The code within the try or catch block is referred to as a protected code. For catch, a catch statement which involves declaring the type of exception that we are trying to catch. Finally, a finally block of code always executes irrespective of occurrence of an exception. And throw, it is used to execute important code such as closing connections, stream. A throw is used to invoke an exception explicitly. Throws is used to postpone the handling of a checked exception. Multiple catch classes: in some cases, more than one exception that could be raised by a single piece of code. To handle this type of situation, you can specify 2 or more catch classes that each catching a different type of exception. When an exception is thrown, each catch statement is inspected by in order, and the first one whose type is matches with that of the exception that is going to be executed. After one catch statement, it executes the another that is bypassed, and execution continues after try and block catch. In throws, if a method is capable of causing an exception that does not handle, it must specify this behavior so that the caller of the method that can guard themselves against that exception. You can do this by including the arrows cause the method's declaration, that is a type method name, parameter list which throws the exception list. Within this open and curly braces, the body of the message that is here given. For finally, the finally is a keyword is designed to address this contingency. See, finally it creates a block of a code that will be executed after a try or catch block that is completed and before the code following the try catch block. The finally block will execute whether or not an exception is thrown. If an exception is thrown, the finally block will execute even if no catch statement matches the exception. Anytime a method is about to return to the caller from inside try or catch block via an uncaught exception or an explicit return statement, the finally cause is also executed just before the method returns. This can be useful for closing the file handles and freeing up any other resources that might have been allocated at the beginning of the method with the intent of disposing of them before returning. The finally cause is optional.